We can start with the title of the show, True Believer, which seems to me kind of loaded in a way, but I can't exactly articulate, or I have my guesses about it, but
Right.
I would love to hear you talk about it a little bit and say how you came about to choosing this particular title.
Yeah, it's a term that I've used for years to refer to artists that seem like they have some kind of supernatural self-confidence, like everything they touch is art. And
Can you think of examples of artists like that? I want to know.
I use it about Bryce Martin,
Okay.
but I don't want that to sound like an insult because it's so.
Of course.
It's just not how I see myself. So I
Yeah.
sort of admire people that have that attitude. Yeah.
And so naming the show that for you, is it kind of like an auto-suggestion or some sort of like imbuing the works in the show with that sensation or vibe that you associate with this? Or is it kind of like, you know, like a twist, like a bit of a wink on like, I'm not a true believer?
It's a little of both. It's kind of, I guess it's an aspiration of mine. And I feel like this show is a step in that direction for me.
Interesting. Okay.
And I think I wouldn't have been able to say that was a kind of a goal in my head a few years ago. And I would build more ways of undercutting the work itself into the work. But yeah, it's not just a term for artists, obviously, and
right.
the climate that we're living in and the people that are believing in all kinds of things that don't connect to the way I see reality. It seems like it just kind of spoke to that, and yeah, just got the ball rolling on what it might be like to look at these works and on the one hand see something very sincere and on the other hand see something that feels like a joke and like that. Yeah.
And you just said that you feel like this is the kind of thing that you wouldn't have even tried to associate with your work a few years ago. The way the work that you made and the way you thought about it, I guess. But now it seems like you're a little bit more in that direction. Like, how do you see your work having moved towards that?
Basically, I feel like I can build the contradiction into the work.
Okay.
I can I'm better at, like, I don't have to go like this and then this. It can be one thing.
Okay. Can you think of something a work you've done before, a group of works that you've done, where you feel like it was a little bit atomized or, sort of divided?
There was old paintings where, like, when I was doing figurative work, where I glued, like, prosthetic teeth onto, like, the smile of a painting.
Okay.
Or I did another portrait where there was a strip of wood that just, like, obliterated. It was, like, under a painted face, but it just kind of absurdly was, like, underneath that. And yeah, I don't know. I also just feel more connected to painting through, working for 20 years now. And I feel like I've, built more and more of the kind of formal skills that it takes to make a successful painting. So I can take more complicated ideas and merge them with some of those those techniques.
Let's talk about your process a little bit, because I think these are things that I've spoken about with you, because I wrote a catalog essay about Matt's work. I was familiar with his work before, but then, I met with him and I did the studio visit with him and we talked a little bit about it. So these are things that I personally have some idea about, but I think it's something that when you come to the work, as a viewer, just like coming into a gallery and looking at these things, then there does come a question: why and how do you choose the things that you choose to paint, because as Sabrina said when she introduced the work, you know, it's like there is the way to gloss your work, you know, in a very kind of like you know, compact way, is to say Matt paints these things that are banal or that are kind of like might be otherwise overlooked, or just part of daily life, or part of the noise that we encounter visually in our, you know, everyday life. And then he kind of makes it grand, or he like really focuses on it and really goes in. And I think the question is why the things, especially because you obviously put so much work into, I mean, there's the question of labor, of like enlargement, labor, all of these things that kind of put a huge focus on these items that might be otherwise overlooked.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sorry, this was like a 7-minute question.
No.
How do you decide
Why
on
do I
this
do
sleeve?
that?
You know, how do you decide on this palette?
Well,
Why Dartmouth? Why Dartmouth?
come on. I think of painting basically as already a kind of a high-level, fancy thing, and paintings are meaningful. Somebody's going to make them by hand, and the way that I make paintings is very carefully, obviously, and I know a lot of traditional techniques. So what I want to find to plug into that is something undeserving, typically, or surprising as a painting subject. It kind of balances out what I see as, you know, is this meaningful? I want you to wonder. And if it was, you know, if it was a more obvious subject, I don't know if you would. And so I'm looking for things that also have visual qualities that fit the way I paint, you know. So
Okay.
that sconce over there, I'm just like, I'm going to crush that cone. I know I'm going to do that.
You're good at sconces.
Yeah, I'm great at
You have
sconces.
done sconces.
I'm one of the best sconce painters.
Yeah.
So that's just a Home Depot, you know, like image, and I was like,
is it from a catalog?
it's
or
just from, I Googled sconce, like, yeah.
just
And
Googled sconce.
yeah, and I looked at a lot of them, and a lot of them are like that. Some of them I did from scratch, like I photographed I bought that gas can and lit it and worked with a photographer. And
Oh, you worked with a photographer?
yeah, and
okay.
I've done that on a few of these, but it's always when I just can't find the right sconce that I have to do it myself. So
What is the right sconce?
it just it already looks like a painting,
It's
and it
kind of
already
it's
feels
a
like
feeling.
yeah,
it's a feeling.
It's like I know technically I'm going to be able to deliver this very well, and it also feels like unique. It's like no one is going to paint this sconce. I've got the sconce market cornered. This
That's
is the
so
Cerletty,
interesting.
you know.
Is there a kind of
subject.
like swagger involved in a way? I mean, because it's so funny because it's like a sconce, right? It's like a Home Depot sconce.
Yeah.
You can't think this is not like
I guess a little
a
bit.
macho
I'm going to make you
flex,
like
but-
this horrible sconce.
Right.
There's a little swagger to that part of
Yeah.
it, but
no, but it's like I'm good at sconces.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm the sconce man. Yeah. It's yeah. So okay. So you're good at sconces, but then you're like good at leaves. You're good at do you or like do you go for stuff that you know you're gonna do well? Is there like a level of experimentation where you're like, okay, I'm gonna choose something that I'm not sure I can do?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there is, but
It's very like incremental. Like it's never like a huge, like this is bound to fail. I'm pretty careful. And there's such a long process of testing it out and working. Like these images are all built on the computer way before I have any paint out or whatever. And I'll print it and pin it to my wall, and it might sit there for a year or something and not
So
happen.
when you say you they're built on a computer, so it often starts from a photo, like a Google image or something that, as you said, you worked on with
Right.
a photographer, and then you manipulate it, you work
Yeah.
it over.
Yeah. I tried to do just this one, for example. I was like, I think it's a good idea to paint a college name or maybe
Okay.
a college sweatshirt. It
Yeah.
seemed like, okay, that could be sort of interesting and slightly provocative.
Yeah.
And I think I tried Stanford and Harvard and a bunch of schools, and it just didn't work. And I put it away.
Yeah.
And then when I started adding these more graphic works to this show, I think Trisket came first, and then I
People
did
are loving the Trisket, by the way.
Great.
Like my friends, my friends who came were like, "Oh, I would buy the Trisket. Love the Trisket." Yeah.
And then I did the hearts that are in there. And
The
I was
two
like,
hearts.
okay, what was up with that college idea? And I just explored it again, and I felt clearer about it. And I was like, I think maybe it can't be the first top college that you think of.
Yeah.
It's got to be a little weird. And so I was like, okay, Dartmouth, that's interesting.
That is
you kind of pull
interesting.
the word apart. So it
Yeah.
just slows down the process of you saying, oh, I get it. You're doing like a bumper sticker that someone would be proud of their child or whatever on the back of their
Right.
car, and you're making it into
Yeah.
a kind of a monochrome fancy painting.
Yeah.
But just, it needed a bunch of little qualities to kind of make it be more than that one-liner.
It's interesting because it is a feeling. Like when you say, "Oh, it can't be Harvard or Yale. It has to be Dartmouth," or it could be like Williams or something, you know,
Could
or
work.
like it could be like, I mean, like a fancy college for sure, and like
Mhm.
where smart people go, and it's hard to get in, and it's like really expensive. But it's like in Hanover. It's like, I mean, it's like, it's specific. There's a specificity there, and I feel like your choices are almost. It's interesting to say that because obviously your choices are very careful and require a lot of work to bring them into fruition. But to me, it seems from what I'm feeling, looking at them and just hearing you talk about it, is that a lot of it is kind of based on a feeling that has to do with like color and texture and just like almost like sensation or something.
Mhm.
It's like I always try to tell people, like, I don't know if other people have this, but when I think about years, they have feelings to them for me. Like 1968 evokes a very different feeling from 1967 for me. And it just like all of my ideas about like hippie beads are like 1967, 1968 might have like black leather might start to come in, or like maybe heroin is coming in more, or, you know, like the runaways are starting to like get raped. You know, it's like there's thing, but then it like imbues it with like a color and a sensation. And I almost feel when I hear you talk about your choices, it's kind of similar. It's not totally rational. Does that ring a bell?
It is, yes. No, well, yeah. I'm like really not very strategic. Like it's
Right.
very just kind of like, I kind of feel like this is a good, you know, and then it's
Yeah.
like, it sits around for a while and I kick it around and then I forget about it and then I'm like, well, come back to, yeah. So it's a pretty normal, like Trisket, for example.
Yeah.
My dad ate Triscuits every night after dinner with wine. And
With
he would
wine?
sit and read a book.
That's so
in like,
interesting.
yeah, and I would go into this
That's
room.
so pleasurable.
It was, yeah,
Yeah.
he would listen to classical music, and I would go and like grab a Trisket and take a little sip of wine and a piece of cheese or whatever.
How old were you?
Like since I was born, like I can't remember this not being the case. Yeah, so like my entire childhood, it was always like this.
Yeah.
And
No cheese or anything?
no,
Just
he had
the-
big like pepper cheese or something.
Okay. It is Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I started eating Trisket. I eat too many Triscuits now.
I love
and
Triscuits.
Yeah. My cat's name is Trisket, and
Oh, wow.
at some point
a
it
big
was just kind of
reveal.
like, why have I not painted Trisket? This is obvious. I have to,
Yeah.
you know, it had kind of, that being on trial thing that I was talking about, it was already happening in my life that I felt like, oh, this is in my voice. You don't have to know all of that story at all, but I
Sure.
feel like I can kind of deliver.
But it's also the logo, isn't it the sort of old?
It's a little bit old, yeah.
It's old because now, so Trisket, I know because my daughter loves Trisket.
I'm a huge commenter on their Instagram, and I'm really, really critical of the designs, and they don't. Yeah, they respond, and
Like,
we have
what
a
do you
back and forth.
say?
I just feel like they don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they have.
Maybe you need to step in.
I would love to.
I mean, because now also they do that crazy thing where there's like a trillion
I don't like all
flavor
that dust. No,
profiles.
don't no rosemary dust. No.
Rosemary,
Yeah.
there's a cracked pepper and olive oil one that Nina, my daughter, is a very big fan of. Dried tomatoes.
They make pico de gallo. They make crazy. Yeah.
Crazy
They've lost
stuff.
it. Yeah.
So your Triscuit, which I think this is important to the work. It goes back to the core of Triscuithood, right? Yes. It's like you're holding on. You know, do you find that the work is? Would you call it like nostalgic in some way, or I mean?
I think it is. I don't love that about it, or sentimental or something.
Right.
Those are words I'm supposed to avoid as a cool deadpan artist.
Right. Yeah.
But I think that aspect of it is actually a way to kind of create a relationship with something unexpected. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah. I hope that painting doesn't feel nostalgic, at least
not at all.
Right now.
Yeah. I mean, not to me, but just hearing you talk about it and then thinking, hey, wait a minute, it does look different now. Mm-hmm. This is like, it is like a more like 1986 moment maybe of that, particular logo profile.
Yeah, it used to be primary color, so yeah. At first I was thinking like, oh, should it be kind of a wheat color, which is what they're doing now?
That's
and
what they're doing now.
Slowly I was
now
like,
it's very
no.
busy. It's very busy. Maybe I should start commenting on their Instagram.
We got to take over. We should do a Triscuit
takeover. What if we suddenly took over Triscuit? That's it. Enough writing, enough art. It's all about like, what is it, Nabisco or something?
Nabisco owns it now, but yeah, I think they're based in like Buffalo areas where it started, but yeah.
We're going to Buffalo. Speaking of logos, I mean, of course, like, I don't know if it's my favorite work in the show, but of course the Pretty Woman piece that's just like around the corner over there is one of my favorites because it is really... It's just so iconic and it's so recognizable, at least to people from our generation.
Totally.
I don't know if like younger people would totally have that same visceral reaction to it. How did that come about?
I have a similar story, like the Triscuit story. I don't want to like do too many of these, but I'll do it fast. My mom had the tape, and I would come home from school and take it off her shelf and watch it, and I felt like I was doing something wrong.
Because it was about...
It was like my mom's movies.
Escort.
It was like Flashdance and Pretty Woman and The Big Chill were all on this shelf.
Right. High concept 80s movies.
Yeah.
Or I guess Pretty Woman is 1990.
It's 90, yeah. And I just loved it and watched it a million times. And I think I watched it over the pandemic at one point. And I was just like, this thing holds up. I didn't expect it to.
I haven't watched it in so long. Maybe I should watch it.
It's good.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It just popped in there. I was like, oh, I can paint Pretty Woman. That's exciting for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, of course, like the actual poster, at least as I recall it, had Richard Gere and Julia Roberts.
They're kind of leaning
back to back
yeah.
against each other. I feel like he has his jacket off, and he's sort of like, it's like thrown over his shoulders. Maybe he has suspenders, and she's wearing like her hooker boots, thigh highs. And I think I remember people were complaining that in the poster, his hair was black. And as we remember, he was a silver fox in the movie. Yeah. So, but of course, none of this, you just did the lettering. Yeah. Are you used to do figuration, obviously, in your work. Are you now, you're done with people?
Never say never. And I have done a few random ones in the last, 10 years. There's probably 3 or 4 or something. But it never starts to build momentum. I feel like at some point along the way, the figure in the work started to feel like a third wheel in the relationship I was trying to have with the viewer.
Interesting.
And it was a lot easier to feel like I could narrow the focus of somebody else that's looking at the work. If there isn't a type of person, inevitably you're going to bring a million interpretations to and a ton of baggage and all kinds of stuff. So if I can,
Yeah.
let's talk about something else. And I want to talk to whoever the person is that's looking at the painting.
Do you think it has to do with like an aspiration to a kind of seamlessness or perfection in your work? Because not that you can't draw figures perfectly well, of course, but there's something messy, more messy about the human form, or it's like superfluous almost, or just like it's not it doesn't lend itself as much to a kind of seamless formality.
I think, well, for me, it's also about like, I want these to feel like that's the epitome of a gas can. But you can't have the epitome of a person. It doesn't make any sense. Like a perfectly generic person doesn't exist.
Right.
And ways to get there are kind of, I don't know.
Maybe like the metaverse.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the Mark Zuckerberg, like horrific, like horrifying.
It could be a good,
But I feel like that would be, I mean, it's something to, but I feel like that's not a person, right?
Mhm.
That's like, I could see you doing like a metaverse character, maybe,
Yeah.
as a sort of generic, scary.
I was trying to do a silhouette of a figure for this show, and I couldn't figure it out. So I'm rooting for this to come back, but it has to somehow be disguised or just generic enough that everybody could kind of see it and be like, okay, that's just a stand-in for me.
Yeah.
But I think of all of these as kind of stand-ins for whoever's looking at them, you know?
Do you, what is the feeling that you would ideally want to the work to evoke in people? I mean, obviously everybody has their own associations and ideas, but I think and this is something that, we talked about with the previous body of work at Karma in New York when you were doing drawings, the idea that these works are, for me at least, both funny and kind of scary. Like there's something, I mean, not scary in any conventional sense, right? But eerie maybe. Or there's something a little bit menacing about them. And for me, at least, but also maybe I'm just bringing my own associations and history into this, like the menace has to do with America or kind of like, because it's so much of this, not all of it, but a lot of it evokes a kind of like, I don't know, suburban dread maybe, which has to do with like class aspiration maybe, or a desire for like predictable comfort, that obviously something is stirring beneath it, like what's this thing called?
Outlet?
The outlet. I can't speak. The outlet that is painted, on the background of this like cheery wallpaper, I guess, right? Like it's something. I feel like, first of all, the outlets look like faces, kind of. If you
scared faces,
intense close up, and they're faces that are. It's almost like the emoji for like, like the scream emoji.
This one too, I hope, is kind of
like
a modernist face in agony, but
it's
kind of a cartoon.
It's agony or it's fear, and you start to think, what has this outlet seen? Like what's it looking out on? And it's supposed to be so comforting. There's these like pattern of flowers, and like what could go wrong really? It seems clean. It's not like one of those things where it's like you're not painting like a shack, like a squat. This is clearly from like some sort of like suburb in New Jersey maybe, or I don't know where, this sort of like upper middle class catalog-y place. But something is off. And I know you've talked about how the work of like Jeff Wall is something that you've looked at, and John Curran as well. I know that's a whole other, kettle of fish. But I'm wondering if that idea of like a kind of like moment, frozen in time, that seems fine. You know, it doesn't portray anything especially harrowing, but there is maybe an undercurrent of dread to it. Is that?
Yeah, I'm hoping so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I want them to feel charged, and so whatever.
Yeah, charge is a good one.
Yeah, whatever dials I can kind of get to the highest level I can get them without you going like, oh, I see what you're doing. I'm trying to do that. So if there's a color thing happening, I want the colors to be as saturated as they can be without stepping over this certain line. And I think, and I'm trying to make images that are just as emphatic as they can possibly be. So I feel like I'm using a lot of advertising language, stock photo stuff, and that type of imagery is made to just grab your attention and make you focus on the thing. And then once we're so trained to kind of ignore ads, but in paintings you're like, well, that's what I'm supposed to do. So using that super emphatic visual language, I feel like you get there and you're like, what am I supposed to do? Like this painting's telling me clearly I'm supposed to conclude something. And so that's sort of the goal.
Right. Is pop important to you? Like,
yeah.
Like, is that because it's on the one hand, these are very poppy, obviously, but pop also was about the seduction of the material world and the kind of disposability of the material world, but also the seduction of it, made through this sort of context shift of like moving from, say, commerce to art or whatever, right? But I think a lot of it leaned on being really, really like banal, but also I just feel like often your things are like a little, like they're a shade down from pop. They're like a little bit more willfully boring. You know what I mean? Or a little, and I know we've talked about your colors before. So, using this mauve or using this sort of like I don't know, light green, like I don't know what to call that green.
Yeah.
These are like kind of paint sample, like it pops, but it doesn't pop. The colors.
Yeah, the sconce looks really good with a darker background, but I think you would know why I chose that more quickly. So I just wanted to dim the room enough that it would work, but not hit you over the head with that choice.
Oh, that's interesting. I think I in the catalog for this show, you said something about how you didn't about the gas can. You didn't want the mouth thing to be yellow. What was it? I don't
like that nozzle. I've grown from
Once again, I'm like, what's that thing?
I knew I wanted to do one of these red gas cans that had the kind of X shape on it, and so I found one that felt right. And I guess I wanted it to feel more like is there a gas can emoji? I want all of these to feel like an emoji, but like there's one where there's like kind of the kind where like you bend it. It didn't have that. And anyway, I just went with this. So I was like, at first I had I had a fully yellow background because I just wanted that nozzle to be gone, like just not have your eye focus on it.
And yet you wanted it to have a nozzle because you decide you could have.
I wanted yellow, and the nozzles are yellow. Yeah. So I had the background yellow. I was like, oh, I think I can do this now.
And did it actually disappear, or was it?
It just started to drift. I was like. It didn't disappear. You could see the like bottom shadow, but it was really subtle. Like if that background was blue, it would grab your eye a lot more than it does right now.
Right.
Yeah.
No, but then you said something interesting that it was going to be yellow, the background, but then it kind of like you made the decision to make it a more greenish color. And you said something like, because it looked like gas would smell.
Yeah, if you pump gas and it smells kind of weird, and it's like, wait, this is poison, but I also kind of like it.
Yeah. So your choice of color somehow has to do with the almost like it has to do with the subject or
these when there's like an object that I've already chosen, that object chooses the background color, and I try a lot of stuff, and it kind of slowly I figure it out, and so some of these other ones, like the fanned out colored rectangles over there, I guess they're like, I think it's Color Aid paper. I'm not too sure.
Is it
It's
like
based
paint,
on an
is it
image
like
that I changed.
paint chips or like, or just like samples?
Yeah. I knew I wanted to do that, but I picked the colors. And so there was something really satisfying for me in the studio, because usually it's kind of like, I'm just trying to kind of help this other thing be its best self.
Yeah.
And with that, I was like, okay, I think I can choose all these colors, which is, and I love using color, and I love using really saturated colors. And so that was.
What's the process like when you work on a painting like this, of obviously this size and this investment, let's say? Do you do a lot of like sketches before? Do you do it in with colored pens? Like, or do you just go on the canvas?
For what? Just any of these?
Yeah, I mean, just in general. I mean, it might be different for different ones, but
I'll mock it up on the computer, and that's usually photographs kind of stitched together or something. And then I'll look at it, and if it seems like it has potential, I'll probably email it to Erin, my partner, and she gets so many of these things that it's just, she should.
Not again.
Yeah. And it helps me if she's like, oh, something here, or like, oh yeah, like that's a good, and then I can I take another, maybe another person gets an email.
Yeah. So there's a lot of back and forth. With the
I like
crew.
getting feedback. Yeah. Sometimes I'm just like, I'm pretty sure, and then I can kind of push something
and
through.
You can be a true believer.
Yeah,
You
I get to be
Bryce.
once in a while.
You can be Bryce Martin.
That's it. And then like after that, there'll maybe be some more refining. Then I'll take a projector and put it on the wall and look at, when you look at it at different scales, oftentimes that'll show me something that's not working, that I can't see when it's smaller.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm in the mood to make a really big painting. I'm just feeling like that. But then the subject that I'm dealing with is like, it's more interesting, not so big.
Right.
And so maybe I would learn that by looking at it on the wall. And so there's kind of a few days where I'm just sort of staring at the thing. And then if it feels like it locks in and, okay, this feels right, I'll get a canvas.
Do you move between different canvases or different
Just
pieces?
as a practical, because one thing's drying and I need something to do. It's not, my natural tendency would be to eat my green beans and then eat the mac and cheese and then, but, and I used to paint like that. But sometimes one's just having problems and it's frustrating and you can just put it over here for a while. And so I kind of try to keep 2 or 3 going, and then maybe I can go to the computer and play with a new idea. And sometimes that one gets so exciting that it's like, oh, we're switching to this. So a lot of these, I was pretty nervous about filling this place. This is my biggest show I've ever done.
It's very big. It's very big. Yeah.
So I was kind of going in thinking.
How long have you been working on this?
A year and a half, I think. Something
like you
like
knew
that.
You knew from the start that it was going to be.
They showed me the floor plan and they were like, going to need to go big here. And so
this is the biggest you've gone.
Yeah. I think I've done one painting bigger than like the boxes on the other side of that wall, but like all of these are kind of at the high end of scale that I do. And then I've never done a show with this many works in it. It's like 12 or something is the most before this. And it also, I didn't want the show to take me 5 years, so it was like it gave me permission to do the boxes and do Trisket. You know what I mean? So it started to be about this dynamic mix of different kinds of painting that I hoped could kind of play off of each other in different ways. And because something like this one or Trisket or Pretty Woman, I think you don't feel long hours of me in my studio working on the thing. They're sort of light on their feet and they're clearly idea driven. And then the weight of the skill that is displayed in some of them I think is kind of lifted by the lightness of that and the gravity of, oh, he can paint these things if, he has those abilities or whatever, kind of helps you to see more in some of the simpler stuff. And so, the previous shows that I've done shows where it's a crazy mix that I feel like it didn't work, and I've done more recently a lot of shows where it's only these kind of like object, shadow, background.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah. Sconce
Yeah.
works.
So this show was exciting to me for the diversity of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm most excited by something like Heroes or Dartmouth or these simpler ones where I feel like this is a successful painting and there's only like 3 ingredients instead of 19 or whatever. And
Yeah.
yeah.
And it still works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you think at all about where the show will be, not just specifically this space, but that this is an LA show?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always think about that a lot. Yeah, so it just made Pretty Woman seem like that much better of an idea.
Right.
But it's not that conscious. I guess at a certain point I was thinking of titling the show Plain Dealer, like it's a Cleveland newspaper.
Interesting.
And it's kind of a weird name.
Yeah.
And the painting of those fanned out papers is called Plain Dealer, but I switched the spelling of plain. And
is it plain like the planes?
like
in the
Plane? Yeah.
Yeah.
But the planes, the newspaper's Plain.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I sort of started to think, it's kind of interesting to go to California and bring some of my Midwestern, just a couple of references. Obviously, the Great Lakes over there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty, normal story to come out to the coast from one of those spots.
Right. From the middle, the
Mhm.
middle to the edges. That's really interesting. I guess that's something that has to do with what I was saying about pop before, because it's like pop is the coast, and the more muted, more modest, I guess, because in some ways, like, these works are like an enormous flex, they're like really big. You're showing what you can do, you're like taking up space. But then you use these like colors that are like turned down.
Mm-hmm. It's my Milwaukee flex.
It's your Milwaukee. It's as much as a Milwaukee guy can flex.
Yeah.
This is the show, I guess. Do you feel like there's like a gender to these paintings? I mean, like, obviously you're a man, but you're like, but I was thinking about it because you were thinking about the influences that, you mentioned a couple, or like these figures that you've looked up to or have thought about, that you've encountered in your life, whether it's, a painter like John Curran or Bryce Martin, who I know you've had like a personal history with him because you used to show at his daughter's gallery when you first started being an artist who shows in the early 2000s, and someone like Jeff Wall, and these are all kind of like daddies in a way, or like these figures for art. I mean, if not in life, figures that are kind of like, it's a lot to live up to.
Right. Yeah, that's an astute observation, I would say.
Thank you.
I mean, this one is, I didn't know about Susan Fracon, who's a abstract painter, until maybe like 3 years ago, and I just got a bunch of books and really love her stuff. So I was
How did you come upon her work?
I don't remember. I think I saw like I was going through Werner's website, like, who don't I know on this list? And she has done all of these amazing, like, burnt sienna paintings. And it just seemed, I was like, wow, that would be really satisfying to do a painting with these colors. It's like, it has a material quality that's completely different than other colors. There's all those earth pigments. And
like burnt sienna is the name of the color is like what everyone encountered in the Crayola box, right? It's like, of course artists know the names of like many colors, but as a child, like I remember it at least.
That's a grown-up color, burnt sienna.
It's a grown-up color, but it is in the Crayola box. That's the pretty basic Crayola box.
Is it?
I think I remember, like, not maybe the most basic, But I remember it as like burnt sienna. You know, like
Yeah.
that's something that I remember from being a kid that I wouldn't know otherwise. It's kind of humble, even though it's a fancy name, but it's kind of humble.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this. Anyway, so you feel like this one was influenced by Susan Fracon's work?
Yeah. I wanted to, that one, I was trying to make a graphic abstract painting. I thought that would be nice. And I wanted the shapes to be organic that were on it. And it just dawned on me. I was like, oh, the Great Lakes is a great shape. Maybe I can use that. And so at first it would kind of look like a postcard. And it was the normal orientation. And it just slowly was like, okay, it even said Great Lakes for a second. And then I was like, I don't think I need that. And then it was like the composition didn't feel quite right. And I turned it and suddenly I was like, oh, it looks like a painting now. It has balance and it reminds you of other paintings, I think.
Yeah.
As much as it's not everybody catches it's the Great Lakes, but
right.
And then at first I think it was green and blue, and I was like, oh, what about maybe I could do some Fracon stuff on this thing.
Some burnt sienna in the mix. I think we have reached the point in the evening where we can see if anyone has questions from the audience, and we do have a mic over there because this is being recorded, so I could probably hear you without a mic, but for posterity, we need the mic. Lily.
Do they ever not work? Do you ever get to a point you do all of the planning and excitement and the feedback and you have this great idea that seems like it's going to be a punchline and you're really excited to paint it and then it falls apart?
Yes.
That's a good question.
There are duds. They're not that common at this point, but I don't know, every 20 or something bad happens. Like I painted that sconce twice because I got to a point where there was a problem with the gradient on the panel thing on the left. And I talked to some painter friends and they're just kind of like, think you're starting over unless you want this to not be a smooth gradient. And I was just like, okay, I think I have time. So I did that one again. But yeah, sometimes I'm like, you know what? I got too excited about something and it didn't go. But I'm pretty good at guessing because it's kind of on trial for so long, you know? Yeah.
Anyone else? Chris Black.
You had such a passionate response to the question about Triscuits.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to ask if you had feelings about wheat thins.
I'm against them. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
I had a feeling that's where this was going to go.
Is it like it's your either Triscuit or wheat thin?
You know, I mean,
because my husband likes wheat thins and I like Triscuits. So it's a divided household.
I get that they're good. They are
right.
good, but it's a bit to just take a firm stance, you know.
Right.
If you look at the ingredients, Triscuit has 3 ingredients. It's like oil, wheat, and salt. Wheat Thins has like 45 ingredients, so it's kind of, I don't know. I think that says it all. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to ask a question.
Yes.
And just for the record, I'm team Wheat Thins.
Uh-oh.
Sorry.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Da, da, da.
I'm sitting here watching the talk, which was great. Thank you both. I'm looking at the robin's eggs and like kind of marveling at the like optical illusion that's in them. And I think that's something that like strikes me about the show is like certain angles of paintings you see your brush stroke and others they disappear and you just really see these like incredibly vivid images. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about like negotiating those two things, because obviously you have all the skill to hide your track and when you decide to show it and why.
I don't totally have all the skill, unfortunately. Like, sometimes it's just kind of like, okay, I guess it's going to be like that. You know, I want it to be totally perfect. And I don't know, it's unusual for people to look that carefully. Everybody thinks that I am like gifted way beyond what I actually am because they're not really looking into it. I'm like, I am highly proficient is how I feel about it. Yeah. and it was sort of fun in different. I'm always trying to be looser, which is not obviously my natural tendency. So doing something like on Triscuit, leaving the yellow, it's not totally opaque. It's like there's like a tan surface that's stained, and then the yellow paint is just put on with a small brush, so you see a lot of little marks. And it just felt good to be like, okay, this one can have a little humanity in it and a little touch. And yeah, my mom told me a story of finding some robin's eggs in her yard that fell out of a nest, and I had her mail them to me, and there they are. Yeah.
So they fell and were intact?
Yeah, they were okay. Yeah. They
Wow.
came in the mail. She bubble wrapped them.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you would think that they would fall, and I mean,
think the whole nest fell, so maybe they were kind of in a good spot. Yeah,
Right.
they were okay.
right. Wow. Magic. Anyone else?
After seeing some of these paintings recently, I see some through lines through some of the works, like the Triscuit one and the Plain Dealer. And I was curious if, as you're making these objects, are you intentionally kind of putting some of those, putting the pieces together, or did it just naturally occur like that?
The show totally was getting built piece by piece from the beginning in a flat version of this space. So as different ideas were kind of coming into the group, I would go so far as to, on my computer, like put them next to other stuff and see if they worked. And actually the eggs, I had that idea for the drawing show, the previous show I did with Karma in New York, and it didn't really work with that group, so I just kind of put it down, and same with that leaf. And so I was like, oh, maybe I'll come back to those later, but the group had been developed so much, and so all of these are, yeah, at first it's kind of like anything goes, and then after you've got, 5 or something, you're kind of like, okay, what else does this need? And sometimes you get an idea like the Outlet or like Band-Aid that I think are really team players, where they're kind of connecting to everything. And yeah, I got to the point where this show was on my computer exactly as it is, except for heroes didn't exist, and I just put a black rectangle on the screen at that scale, and I was like, that looks good, I need a black rectangle. And so I don't know, a couple weeks later I was kind of like, what does David Bowie's Heroes album cover look like again? And I was like, okay, maybe I can take everything out except for that word and have it, it's hanging it's placed on, there's this cool photo of him, and he's kind of doing like a modern dance, like crazy pose, and it says David Bowie Heroes, but that word is kind of like right at his fingertip in this weird pose, so it's off center, and it had all of this reason to be interesting once you took it all of the imagery out.
And does it have the quotations? I don't remember.
It does have the quotations, which was
Interesting.
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. Heroes. Oh my god. Okay. Anyone? Are we done? Maybe. Okay. I guess we're done. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Yay.
Thanks, guys.